Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to FOB TV, the future of business. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict. I'm a futurist and lecturer at TCS, and I want to welcome everyone to the show today. I'm really excited to welcome back today's guest, David Espindola. David, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
So for those of you who haven't watched any of the previous shows that David has joined us on, let me introduce you. He's a futurist, transformational leader, an AI educator, advisor, strategist, a keynote speaker, and an award-winning author of the book Soulful, You in the Future of Artificial Intelligence. Now, I thought about David when I put together this series because this series is called The Future of Happiness. And we're really exploring, what does it mean to be happy? What can we do today to prepare for the future of happiness and to do our best anyway to ensure that we are building that into our thought processes and our scenarios as we think through what do we really want to accomplish? What is the real purpose of technology? All those kinds of things. So that gets us where we are today, David. So where are you calling in from?
So I'm in the Twin Cities metro area in Minnesota.
Awesome. What's the weather like today?
Beautiful day today, sunny skies, temperature is mild, so it's a nice spring day.
Oh, that's great.
How about you?
One of the things I really like to ask, David, is especially people that are looking at the future, studying the future like you are, all of these things. What is your journey? How did you end up in this role of looking toward the future and talking about the future as a profession?
Yeah, so I think it all started with, my career in technology. I spent almost 30 years managing, leading technology-driven transformation. And with that background, I started to spend a lot of time thinking about how technology is changing so fast. And I started to wonder about, our ability as humans, as organizations, to be able to keep up with all those changes. So that led me to my first book, which was called The Exponential Era, where I talk about several platforms that are growing at exponential rates and how they're impacting businesses and society. And then that led to a second book, Soulful, which is focused on artificial intelligence and its impact on our future. So that's how I got involved in this.
So talk to us about your book, Soulful. How have readers responded? What kind of feedback have you got from that book?
Yeah, so the response has been very good. The book won the Best Indie Book Award.
Congratulations, David.
Yeah, thank you. So I was really pleased with that recognition. It was also a finalist on 3 other awards. So I think it's resonating with people. When I engage in conversations in book events that I have talked about the book, people respond very positively because I think the book inspires people to think about deeper questions, which leads to very interesting conversations. So I really enjoy that conversation
Awesome.
that happens with the audience.
Now, talk to us about your process of coming up with the title, Soulful.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to capture that juxtaposition between being human and dealing with the emotional, the soft side of being human, contrasting with the cold, hard, analytical side of AI. And the point was, it's the two coming together that really is going to make a difference. So I try to position the book as a optimistic view of the future where humans will collaborate effectively with AI. And so I wanted to put together those two sides of the equation, of the human side and the AI side.
Oh, we're gonna have a fascinating discussion today, David. So let me just ask, what kinds of opportunities has that book and these kind of discussions opened up for you?
Yeah, so it's been good. The book has opened up several opportunities for me to speak at numerous events, now all the way from small gatherings to large conferences. I've also, benefited from the fact that by writing about AI, it sort of positions you as an AI expert.
Yeah.
And so that has led to some advisory roles. I've also had a chance to teach at the University of Minnesota about AI. So it has opened up a few opportunities.
Oh, that's always good to hear.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, David, this is a series on the future of happiness. And I think probably before we dive into this, let me just ask you, what does the word happiness mean to you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the way I like to think about happiness is I think of happiness in two terms. One is short-term happiness, right? So that's the fleeting happiness, if you will, that you get when you have a scoop of ice cream, or if you buy a new car, you have that
some dopamine.
So that may last a few days, maybe a few weeks, a few months, but it's fleeting, right? It's once you get used to the car, then that doesn't do anything for you anymore, right?
Yep.
And so the other side of this is the long-term happiness, right? So that's when you have sustainable contentment, let's say. It's a more stable, feeling of well-being that you have regardless of what's happening in terms of short-term circumstances. And so this is the deeper concept that I try to talk about in the book. And I think it's some of the things that you've been researching as well, is this deeper, well-being. So in the book itself, I talk about a few concepts that relate to this idea of short-term versus long-term happiness. So in the book, I talk about time preference, and there's low time preference and high time preference. And the way to think of this is high time preference is seeking immediate gratification. It's having that short-term span and being in constant search of immediate gratification. And low time preference is when you have the ability to take a long-term approach, to contemplate the bigger questions, to seek that longer-term sustainable contentment. And that leads to the other two concepts that I talk about in the book as well, which is hedonism versus eudaimonism. So hedonism is, where you're seeking short-term pleasure, short-term, happiness, and eudaimonism is a concept where you're really focusing on that long-term sustainable happiness. And so high time preference induces hedonism, and low time preference induces eudaimonism.
So are these concepts able to be replicated in technology with AI? Are these things, Frank Diana on our team here that leads our team, he wrote an article today about large behavioral models in AI, and really about what happens when robots are able to recognize and produce the same kinds of, at least visually display the same kinds of emotions as humans, and in fact know how to convey those emotions to humans, and maybe even manipulate or guide humans to having predefined emotions as well. So are these the kinds of emotions that can be produced by technology?
Yeah, so my thinking aligns with what you just mentioned from Frank. AI doesn't feel anything, right? But it's very, very good at detecting human emotions and then mimicking those emotions. So it has the capability of replicating this sense of happiness and convey that sense of happiness to us. But these are not, genuine feelings that they have. It's just the way that they replicate what we impart to them. So that's the way I think about it. So in a way, it can replicate happiness, but it's just a regurgitation of human emotions. It's not genuine emotions coming from AI. So being able to delineate those two things is very, very important, right? Because I think it's very easy for us to start thinking that AI has, a mind of its own, and that it actually has feelings, and that we could have AI as a friend or a confidant, and that's just not the case.
So you describe this type of happiness that is longer term, that is almost more closely associated with long-term contentment.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt, I've been interviewing a series of futurists and professors in Finland because for 8 straight years they're ranked number 1 in happiness. Yet when you bring that up to a Finn, they're like, it's hard for us to believe because we are very content, but we don't see ourselves like expressively bouncing around being happy. So they really do associate their contentment with satisfaction in their existing life rather than perhaps some of the other things. But I just wanted to find out from you in your life today, David, what brings you happiness? Let's put some context around this so we can talk about it at a deeper level.
Yeah. So first, I'd like to just make a comment on the episodes that you've had in the past with, I watched one of them with a futurist from Finland, and I find it quite interesting, right, that Finland ranks number 1, given that, number 1, they don't get a lot of sunshine, right? So I personally think that sunshine has an impact on your overall level of happiness, but it's not the primary factor, obviously. And in listening to him, the one thing that he said that really caught my attention was he said there's a lot of trust in their society. And so that got me thinking about, there are several studies that show that the number 1 factor for human happiness is relationships. And so when you think about human relationships, one of the factors that influences positive relationships is trust. So I think the fact that they have a lot of trust in their society enables them to have good, positive relationships. And I think that leads to happiness. So that was sort of my thinking behind, the conversations that you had with the folks from Finland. And I think you saw some of that in your trip there. Yeah. Sounds like you had a great time there.
Yeah. So you also write about a future world, David, where AI helps improve all kinds of things, like improve productivity that results in abundance, creates an evolving meaning of what it means to work in the future, a possible higher quality of life as a result, with even greater opportunities for individuals to pursue fulfilling endeavors. Now, to me, that sounds like happiness. What are your thoughts?
So I think there's potential for happiness, right? In the sense that if we have a future with abundance, produced by technologies, by AI, and we have our basic needs met that way, I think that will potentially reduce some of the anxieties that we might have about, our basic needs. However, I don't believe that abundance necessarily leads to happiness. I think, like we talked about earlier, relationships are really, really important. And so one of the things that worries me is where technology is taking society in terms of human relationships, because I have this sense that we're becoming more isolated. We hear more and more of this epidemic of solitude, right? People are we're more connected than ever, right? On social media, we have more connections than we've ever had before, and yet we don't have those deeper relationships, and that to me is a reason for concern. And the other aspect of this that worries me is, that people may be preferring to interact with AI and robots because they are more predictable, and it's easier to have relationships with these entities versus dealing with the messiness of human relationships. And by doing that, they forego those soulful connections that are so important to our well-being.
Oh yeah, because with robots, with AI, with all the various Chat GPTs and Gemini and Perplexity and everything else, you can assign a relationship to the AI agent. And you can tell them how you want to be addressed and treated. And then you don't have the friction in the relationship anymore, do you? It makes things different. And in some ways, probably simpler because you've told them who they are and how to treat you.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you wouldn't say that that's a soulful relationship.
Right. Yeah. So you're basically, creating this entity that in a way mirrors who you are, and in a way is always doing things the way you want them to be. But that's not the real world, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we deal with human beings that are complex in nature, and there's so many factors involved in human relationships. And if you don't develop the ability, the skills to navigate through a world where you have to deal with human relationships, I don't think that's a good thing.
Mm. You also talk a lot in your book about three words in particular, David: inherent human traits.
Hmm.
So, in reading your book, Soulful, it seems that you're suggesting that true happiness arises from embracing and cultivating our inherent human traits. Now, and which remain beyond the reach of artificial intelligence. That's your supposition, that inherent human traits are not able to be replicated. Talk to us about that idea.
Yeah. So, one of the points that I make in the book is that we need to be more attuned to our intrinsic motivation, right? So that's what drives us to do something that's interesting, that's challenging, that is purposeful. And in the book, I talk about the science of flow. And flow is an experience that you have where you are doing what's called autotelic tasks. And that means you're doing things for the sake of doing them. You're not really concerned about any external rewards. You're doing it because you enjoy doing it. And that kind of activity brings joy to our lives. So this is supported by research that shows that being in a state of flow leads to a happier life. And I think that's beyond the reach of AI because AI doesn't have any intrinsic motivations, right? So AI is basically behaving according to the objective functions that we impart to them. So it's all human driven, and they don't have any intrinsic motivations that would lead them to have this kind of experience. So in a sense, I do believe that this is out of reach for AI.
So let's use some examples of what inherent human traits are. Do you have a list you could share with us?
Yeah, so I think it's our ability to relate to one another. It's our ability to love one another and to have empathy. So these are all very important human traits that are unique to us. But there are also other traits that I think induce flow and induce, the ability for us to enjoy the things that we do. And those are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So those three things are really, really important. And they're key ingredients for any activity that requires getting a state of flow. And then there's something else that I think is quite interesting, and that I can relate to, and this is the idea that having faith really leads to life satisfaction in general. So studies have shown that people that have faith in general have a greater level of happiness and life satisfaction. And what's interesting is that, this idea of seeking to understand faith and seeking faith usually happens later in life for most people. And some of it is just because, I think later in life we're a little bit more comfortable with the inconsistencies, with the big questions. We're starting to wonder about the big questions. We start to think about our own mortality, right? So all of these things lead to the desire to seek faith and understand how that can be a part of our lives. And that by itself can lead to traditional happiness.
And David, for the benefit of those that are listening, what do you mean by faith?
So faith is believing in something that is beyond yourself. Is in my case, my faith is based on Christianity. So I believe in God, and I believe in the foundations of Christianity. Other people may have other beliefs, but having that faith component in life, regardless of what religion you follow, as long as you engage in it and don't just say that I am, that I follow a certain religion, that engagement leads to a happier life. Studies have proved this.
So, in other words, there is some transformational component to that faith, because without that, what's the purpose, right? There has to be some life-changing component of that. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So is there a way that humans can use technology in such a manner as it reduces the things that cause unhappiness and therefore makes us happier?
So I think with technology, we need to be able to leverage the things that are positive and control the things that are negative, right? So in particular, the things that I believe could be negative from a technology standpoint, one is the invasion of privacy, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this is going to become more and more prevalent as we engage more and more with technology. And I think the temptation will be for us to more and more let our privacy go so that we can benefit more from technology, right? I think we struggle with that today, right? When you're
absolutely
dealing with whether you're doing a Google search or whether you're doing email, all of that is leaving, breadcrumbs that say something about you. So in a way, you're sort of giving up your privacy. And I think with AI, AI is going to know more and more about us. And what do we want to share with that AI, right? Where do we draw the line on privacy? I think it's going to be a very important question in the future. And then there are other issues that we need to deal with as well. This whole issue of human judgment. Where do we insert the human in the loop when AI has to make some important decisions, especially if we're talking about life and death decisions? We need to have a human in the loop to make those decisions. And then, obviously the one that we've talked about extensively, which is relationships, right? So how do we manifest our need to have human relationships and not replace those relationships with AI or other intelligent capabilities? I think those are all important factors.
So do you think that automation of our work and automation of some of the basic needs through AI and robotics, do you think that it could perhaps create more space for creative and purposeful and joyful pursuits that would, in fact, create an environment that's happier for us? Can you imagine that kind of environment, David?
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something. I believe that so it goes back to this whole idea of high time preference and low time preference. So if you are in a high time preference environment, if you're always super busy, right, and you're always under pressure to produce, and you're always looking to get short-term gains, that is not inducive to creativity. That's not inducive to inspiration, right? Because inspiration takes time. So the point is, if we get to an environment where you have machines, AI, producing the things that we need for our basic needs, right? So our material needs. So you can refer back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, right? At the very basic level, you have physiological needs. Second level is security. So if you have your physiological needs and your security taken care of, then you can spend more time seeking those other needs, right? Which is love and belonging and self-esteem and self-actualization, all of those things. So I do think that there is potential for technology to create the abundance that we need in order to meet our material needs. And if that happens, then I think we'll have more time and more energy to dedicate to the things that are of higher purpose and be more creative and be more in tune with, nature, with artistic expressions, with things that I say are things that are of higher purposes for us as humans.
This is, to me, is just a brilliant conversation, David, because we've all seen how technology can be destructive and can be harmful for children, for adults, for everything from people going broke because they have a habit of online gaming and they're in debt and they've lost everything because of gambling. You see things where it's just destructive for the self-esteem of youth in different environments like that. So we absolutely know there can be harm there. I think it's really up to all of us to look at this technology, understand what an inherent human trait is, what we want to pursue, what we want our purpose to be as humans, and to be able to foster the kinds of positive human relations that we're after, and then just look for ways in which technology can be used to enhance those environments rather than diminish the human quality that we want. And it's a hard battle, but one certainly worth fighting. Would you agree with me, David?
I agree 100%. I think that's the essence of this conversation, really. AI and technology, these are just tools, right? Just like fire. Fire, you can use fire to destruct things, or you can use fire to cook a wonderful meal, right? So yes, it's how you leverage these tools for the benefit of humanity that makes the difference.
David, I want to thank you again. And David's book again is Soulful. Look at it. Author David Espindola. Thanks for joining us today, David.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It was great talking to you.